we go. Very good. Good morning. That was awful. Say it again, but don't be rude. Good morning. Good morning. Good. Welcome back into the Keynote Hall. Thanks for joining us this morning. I know some of you were up a little late last night enjoying that fine nap of wine, as you should have been. So we're going to get it kicked off again today. Hopefully get a little bit of energy. We have some great speakers. I'm going to be followed by Dimitrios Brinkman, who you're not going to want to miss, and obviously a full day of sessions. So to get us going, I wanted to talk about this quantum shift that you keep seeing around. I see some of you wonderfully wearing these Shift Happen t-shirts. And you see the branding all over the place of quantum shift. And while that might be a wonderfully clever, very self-aggrandizing, but might be a very clever marketing slogan, it's real. The quantum shift is real. And when I was thinking about this as I was listening to all of your talks and listening to all of the keynotes, I just asked myself, what does that really mean? What is a quantum shift in technology or just in general? What do these quantum shifts really mean? And so just like a smart person, I asked a smarter person, who in this case was Gemini, and gave me an appropriately somewhat dry but appropriate answer of a sudden, dramatic, and fundamental shift in what we do. It's a transformative change, one state to another, immediate and significant impact. I thought that hasn't really happened very often. We hear about change all the time. How many of you hear your bosses or your boss's bosses say, change is opportunity, right? We hear that all the time. And it's accurate. But there's a million micro changes and medium changes all day, every day. Change is opportunity. And as a person that's in marketing and communication and really enjoys dealing with customers and solving real customer problems, I'm always looking for that opportunity. What is that? And I don't just mean to sell somebody something. We're all friends in this room. We all have products. We all develop solutions. We're all looking for opportunities in the market, but also for ourselves. Where are those opportunities that we can better our careers, we can better our companies, we can better our solutions, and we can just be better as a society? And I thought if change equals opportunity, man, a shift must equal a monumental opportunity, a very large opportunity. So here's my little cheat sheet that I built for myself of what a quantum shift in technology actually looks like, as opposed to a change. What makes these opportunities so great? First, a shift happens, and it's usually pretty exciting, but we don't know what to do with it yet. That's how you can tell that the momentum is carrying so fast that we just don't know quite what to do with it at the outset. And that's okay, but we've seen some of these shifts come and go. A very brief example is, I'm old enough to remember when cloud computing first came around and everybody just talked about cloud as though it was going to be the only thing in the universe. But everybody looked around and said, I've got all these data centers, I've got all this investment, got all these application servers. What even are those anymore? And what do I do with all this stuff? And I just don't quite know what to do. It's also generally consequential. And what I mean by that is a quantum shift in the way that we think is going to affect everybody. Now, inside this room, we have some very specific technical problems that we like to solve that are very consequential for our business and very consequential for our partners and for our own customers. That's great, but your grandmother probably doesn't care about DevSecOps the same way you do. It's not the same for a general audience. Quantum shifts also reshape our expectations of things. And I'll talk about that in just a second. It's not, again, just our experiences in these walls, whether it's your business or at JFrog, but how does it reshape the way that everybody thinks about everything? And often these quantum shifts happen uncomfortably quickly. And that's to all of us. When we feel like things are happening at us that we have to deal with, that's how we know we're dealing with these tectonic shifts. And the time for those things has been compressing. Move from waterfall development and these 6-month delivery cycles to microservices. It took a little while. And then we get a little bit of continuous integration, a little bit more, right? Little baby steps. All of a sudden, AI comes and goes, whoom. You got about 3 days to figure all of this out. Congratulations. And if finally you want to identify what a big shift in technology really looks like as opposed to just a change, think if you put the word era or age behind it. No one says, that was in the CI/CD era. Okay? Nobody says that was the era of waterfall development necessarily, right? These are changes, they're important, but this is not what we say. We do say, however, this is the era of AI. We say, this is the age of the internet, or the information age. These are things that make sense. So all of these things bring the changes and the quantum shift to us very quickly. Now, just for fun and to keep us going and keep us awake, there were some things, at least in my past, I'm younger than some of you and older than some of you, a few things that happened probably before, maybe before you were born, Adel, that happened in our universe that at the time felt like these big shifts, okay? They felt so important. And they were important at the time, maybe only to us. Who here remembers the IDE flame wars of the mid-2000s? Okay, handful of you remember that. The biggest argument we could have at the time and the future of software development, especially enterprise Java development, boiled down to which IDE you chose. And were you an Eclipse shop or were you a NetBeans shop? And if you were really cool, you bought IntelliJ IDEA and got some support from the cool kids. And then we had sub-arguments about, do you say J2EE or is it Java EE7? Like, these are important things to talk about, right? Were they important? Yes. Are they important to us? Yes. Is that a monumental shift in technology? Absolutely not. Not outside this room. We also remember the days where people said things like, on-prem is dead. One side of the pendulum. We also had another side of the pendulum that said, cloud is just somebody else's computer, famously, and it's just a fad and it's going to go away. So, quick show of hands. This is completely informal, unscientific poll, but how many of you have 100% of all of your workloads, all of your development, everything is in the cloud, period? One hand. One. How many of you are 100% on-premise, all of your development, all of your infrastructure, all of the hardware that you've ever bought, your own data centers, only on-prem, no cloud, anything? Zero hands. So, while we spent some time fighting years ago about on-prem versus cloud, who's dead, who's stupid, who's right, who's smart, where did we settle? The answer was yes. We're all correct. And it will be fit for purpose. And what are we hearing from even our partners at NVIDIA and ServiceNow and others? This is going to be a fit for purpose, what gets the job done the best in the way that makes the most sense for my company, my regulations, my developers, my customers, my workloads. And I'm going to do it my way, and we don't have to fight about this anymore. So while that felt like a shift to us, really it was just a little bit of change management, a little bit of thrashing, and we got to a place where we're ironed out. Now I'm going to get real personal. For some of you in the room, have a real sore spot for DevSecOps. Again, informal poll. Who thinks that we have all figured DevSecOps out? Everybody has figured it out. Oh. I'm surprised that my friends over here from Forrester and IDC didn't raise their hands, because isn't that how you make your money, is telling us how we figured it out? So we've still got a lot of processes to work out here, but we just come out of an era that started roughly 2008, maybe a little later, that we were all arguing about who had the best scanner for this. And DevSecOps is dumb, and that phrase doesn't even make any sense because SecOps is a thing, so how dare you subsume my acronyms. We're still in the middle of these changes inside our organizations. But that does not a quantum shift make. But if I was summing this up, in general, what seems important in this room, in the seasons in this room, are what are we doing as development teams, DevOps teams, DevSecOps teams, and where is that friction maybe that happens with the business? Not that someone's right or wrong, but where does the friction happen? In general, if I sum up some of those changes, you wanted to be fast, that's your job, good. You wanted to be free, Good job. You wanted to have the latest cool tools and processes and automate everything? Good job, that's exactly what you should do. And you wanted to be agile and address the latest needs of the business, but also just do some interesting stuff. Good, that's exactly what you should do. The business is also doing exactly what it should do by saying, hold your horses, pal, not so fast. I've got a lot of infrastructure, some of the big companies, stuff that's been sitting around for 30, 40 years. I can't change overnight. I'm not going to change my deployment models. I'm not going to change my dev tools. I'm not going to change from a legal perspective right away. That's just not going to work. And I see many of you out here that have been at swampUP and worked with JFrog for a number of years that have felt this pain over time in various areas of your business. Everything from how you develop to how you deploy. It's great. Everybody's doing that. So what's different then, if we're talking about change versus a quantum shift, in how AI is changing what we do today? And we're going to talk a little bit about later with Dimitrios and with Gal about how this becomes more practical technically and from a user perspective. But going back to my little checklist, if you remember some of the things that make a shift, one is the speed is staggering. How many of you feel like you're ahead of the curve with AI? Wow. Again, analyst friends, come on. Come on. You're ahead of the curve. Nobody's ahead of the curve. Well, Adel might be making the curve for us from NVIDIA. He might be creating the curve, but ahead of it is bold. But this is happening at us very quickly. And I don't know if you were with us at swampUP a couple of years ago, and we had just, this was just in the era of a few months after kind of ChatGPT took over the world. Gen AI is the rage in public and in our own workshops. And we had a little while, like 3 days, to figure it all out as we got into our enterprises, right? Now we've gone from a release every quarter to some companies are thousands of releases every day. We were meeting with a customer yesterday. They've got, 3,000-4,000 applications, and each of those applications has sometimes, dozens of microservices with them, and 10,000 developers working on these things, and it's continuous. Dink, 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 dink. They've put the automation in, releasing all day. Foundational models, as you heard Yuval talk about, even some of these big rocks that are the foundation of some of the next generation of AI that we're using, are changing sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly. And that's not even getting into the LLMs and the smaller for-purpose models that you've built yourself on the edge. All of those things are changing almost daily. So the speed is very compressed for us. Also, AI, unlike maybe some of the only somewhat humorous changes that we're talking about, I saw some scars on your faces when I talked about DevSecOps especially, I'm sorry. AI is affecting everybody. 99% of Americans right now use a common AI service or tool every week. And you're thinking to yourself, what, like ChatGPT or Gemini or something like that? Maybe. But it's also very much these hidden realms of it. It could be something as simple as an intelligent weather application. Could be something as simple as a little completion assistant that they're using while they're doing a text message that's powered by AI. 64% of Americans have no idea they're even using it. That's how much AI has changed the interface that AI has with the general public. Everybody's using it. 2/3 of us have no idea. And it changes our expectations. I'll tell you how, in a similar way to cloud computing. How many of you had an external hard drive once for your pictures? Almost all of us. How many of you still use an external hard drive for all of your pictures? Maybe a quarter of the same. And maybe you're a better photographer than I am. I'm the lazy guy with the iPhone camera, right? Which is at least better than it used to be. Still not great, but I'm sure we just got an announcement yesterday that it's amazing again. But we store our pictures in the cloud. Your grandmother stores her pictures in the cloud and knows that she stores her pictures in the cloud. Or at least she did, because since she passed recently and she's in the cloud. Love you, Nana. But we all do it. And it just changed our very existence. So those expectations changed. Now 50% of Americans, and not just the cool kids or the children under 25 or 30 or 40 years old, use AI knowingly for common tasks. This is like, write me an email for this. Excuse me. Write me an email for this. Give me a summary of this thing. Make me a podcast of this document for what it's intended for, as a productivity tool. That's 50% of society already in a period of maybe 2 years, going from almost zero to hero in that. Very compressed. What are some other shifts that changed this for how we do business? How many of you would say the internet did not change society? Dumb question, but it fundamentally changed. Roughly, we'll say late 90s. Didn't happen overnight, but roughly late 90s, before all the dot-com crashes and things, we started to see glimpses of how the internet and connectivity was going to change lives. And we would be silly today to think that not always being connected was preferable, though sometimes it's a curse even, because you're always connected. The next quantum shift that happened really was around mobility, specifically, though, the smartphone, but mobility in general. But smart mobility, we all remember the very first Apple keynote where Steve Jobs held up an iPhone and said, this is the new thing you should expect, because you now have the entire internet and the knowledge of humanity in your pocket, and you can bring it anywhere and access it anytime. And that completely changed the way that we all think about information and how we think about how we communicate. That's a quantum shift. Cloud was another one. I just gave you the example of photo storage. There's millions more examples, but not having only one place to keep your data and not having to keep all of it locally, whether that's a consumer talking about their pictures or videos or their family mementos, or if that's about businesses and how they deal with massive amounts of data and applications. Either way, having services changed everything. And as I look at the opportunities that are before us, and when I say us, I don't mean JFrog, I mean us, all of us. AI is that next quantum shift. Now, like any big shift, there are still the naysayers. I remember when smartphones first came out, I remember it because I was guilty, okay? It was like, that seems nice, but I could already, send a text message saying to my wife I would be home in 15 minutes from the grocery store. I had to push a button 47 times. Click, 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 click. Hi, right? A little ridiculous, but it seemed okay. And I was like, that's cool, but maybe it won't matter. Maybe it won't be as consequential. I was not very visionary. I didn't quite see it the way Steve did, but I was wrong about that. And just like how AI is today, emerging, you've heard all of the amazing technologies coming out. NVIDIA has become, the most valuable company on the planet, depending on which day you're talking about. And they're up here changing the world in how AI is working. This is an amazing shift and changing daily. So again, looking at opportunities, these real shifts go beyond these walls. Past the dev teams, past the processes, past all the automation that you've just built for the last 20 years, and change life in general around us. And if that foundational technology is something that we're all going to take advantage of, we also have to have foundational infrastructure that we're all providing to enable that. You saw ServiceNow up here. You saw NVIDIA up here. There are some foundational technologies that are emerging immediately that are going to be the standards that everybody is going to operate against. And that's how we're going to approach today, is how do we take these fundamental, foundational technologies, as we have just explored, and how do we make those practical to use, and how do we take advantage of the opportunities before us? So I'll sum it up pretty quickly. By the way, I still see some of these butterflies sitting around from yesterday. I don't know if you saw some of those on the floor. They're not here, but I have to give a public shout out to the staff here at the resort. We had 3 or 4 people in here with like backpack vacuums, and it took them like 3 hours to clean up after all that. So it was a wonderful idea, but take one home as a souvenir if you see one. So seizing the opportunity. The shift is inevitable. AI is mainstream, it is not a toy, and everything that you are doing with it is consequential today, right now. It was consequential yesterday, and you haven't done it yet. And you're going to hear from Dimitrios on some of the kind of coming challenges when it comes to AI and that mainstream nature. Security is about people in this shift. What do I mean by that? You heard Asaf Karas yesterday talk about the latest supply chain attacks. My mother-in-law, who just turned 80 a couple of days ago, was talking about how she felt like she had a phishing scheme and a cybersecurity attack on her phone and on her social media. These are things that are part of the vernacular for everybody now. And it wasn't just about movies like The Hackers and war games like from when we were kids. It's everybody. We did talk a little bit about GRC and compliance as new players in this quantum shift that also give you an opportunity to not only seize market share, but also get in front of the game and solving some of the pains that come with these quantum shifts. There's some very hard problems, and we actually had, I see you sitting over there, John, from AT&T. Hi. He didn't know I was going to call him out, but he joined us for our Investor Relations Day yesterday and had some very clear and concise issues that he, like many other companies, are facing when it comes to just proving compliance, right? What do they say? 90% of compliance is proving compliance? That's a pain in the butt. So how are we, as we adopt this shift and take the opportunities and take advantage of this shift, addressing some of the new personas and new business problems that are coming? Finally, how many Star Trek fans in here as opposed to Star Wars? Okay. How many people are silly and like Star Wars better? I think I might have started a civil war. In the words of Brent Spiner and his data character, resistance is futile. Except he said resistance is futile, and it was awful. Resistance is futile, data. Futile. You cannot ignore this. You cannot ignore it. When we join you for swampUP next year, there will be people in this room who have taken advantage of all of these opportunities, done the hard work of learning, thinking ahead of the curve, taking advantage of everything that this shift can give you, and they'll be ahead of the game, or at least ahead of their peers. I mean, we may not be ahead of the game in AI for a while, for all of us, but they can be ahead of their peers. There will be those that say, it's just someone else's computer. Or there will be those that say, use that IDE, you're stupid, and treat it as another change and just act as though, I've seen this before. I've been through a lot of technology changes. It will go like this. No, it will not. No, it will not. And we want to see you in this room next year actually having succeeded in some of these areas. Speaking of next year, just announced we will be having swampUP in New York City next year, September 1st through September 3rd. So we will shift we will shift our efforts to the East Coast. It's going to be amazing, and registration is now open for this. Also, though, before we think about next year even, we are this year doing swampUP Europe for the very first time. And in mid-November, we will be holding swampUP Europe in Berlin. Why do I tell you that? Am I expecting you to fly to Berlin? Not necessarily, though you're welcome to join us. But many of you are in global companies here. Many of you have global teams, and this will be in Berlin in the middle. You can see it at swampup.jfrog.com. Invite your colleagues, invite your friends. There's going to be some very similar breakout sessions, similar content to be able to train them up, as well as some updated announcements from what you saw today. So if you want to keep up to date with the latest and you have colleagues in Europe, that's for you. So with that, thank you so much. I am turning it over to Dimitrios Brinkman, who's going to talk about the agentification of software and some of the problems that maybe are emerging around that from a UX perspective. And then we'll wrap up our keynote session today with Gal Marder, our Chief Strategy Officer, talking about getting practical with how these integrations work in the area of AI. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of swampUP.